to do this because I'm not used to these mic things, so we'll just play it by ear. Okay, we're going to start with the third place essay winner, Natalie James.
Translating consumerism into domestic abuse. Judging by the ads we see every day in magazines, on TV, on the radio, on the internet, on buses and trains, on food packaging, and on just about any other item of frequent use, we are a culture obsessed with sex. Specifically, we glorify women as sexual objects. The female body is the pinnacle of the advertising industry. One of the strongest and most influential forces on the persistence of domestic abuse is the toxic sexualization of women in the media, specifically in advertising and politics. Although they seemingly pass under our nose daily, many advertisements are, upon closer observation, quite often outrageous and ridiculous. Ads that use sex as a mechanism to sell are particularly excessive. A recent ad for Budweiser shows the side of a bottle of Budweiser beer, upon which a scantily clothed woman is superimposed. Her small shirt is a part of the Budweiser label on the bottle. Another recent ad for BMW shows a beautiful young woman from the shoulders up, presumably naked, and then writes, "You know you're not the first, but do you really care?" Such ads are so incredulous for a reason. The advertisement industry survives off sensationalism. It creates ads that people can't help but notice. Ads are everywhere in American life. They are inescapable and omnipresent. Inevitably, their viewers internalize the messages and the values they portray. Many of these messages and values portray women in an unrealistic and unhealthy light. The aforementioned ad for Budweiser, for example, seems to suggest that the young woman is also an object to be popped open and enjoyed, like the bottle of beer. The BMW ad, additionally, seems to be equating a relationship with a woman with a relationship with a car. These ads are so detrimental and toxic because they promote the objectification of women. Countless ads quite literally portray women as objects, as shown in the Budweiser and BMW ads. Chronic exposure to images of women that are equated with objects inevitably teach men to treat real women like objects, and teach women to accept this aggressive behavior. Additionally, the objectification of women in advertisements sends the message to men they are somehow entitled to women. A consumer culture that treats women as commodities will no doubt lead some men to adopt the ideology that they own or have a woman, that they have participated in a system that will reward them with women. The implication of a company using images of women to sell their product is that if someone buys their product, the customer not only gets to have the product itself, but a woman as well. Consumer culture has turned women into commodities. It is this commodity model of women that leads to violent and abusive behavior on the part of men. It should not be forgotten that there are also cases of domestic abuse in which women abuse men, but for all intents and purposes, this paper is focusing on the relationship between female victims and male perpetrators. A man who has internalized a sense of entitlement and the commodity model will tend to feel that sex and women belong to him and that he has rights over it. Anything that stands in his way is met with aggression and resentment. When he feels wrongfully denied of sex, the result may be rape. When he feels wrongfully denied of love or commitment, the result may be emotional, physical, or psychological abuse. A helpful analogy for the mindset of an abuser is a scenario in which the abuser discovers his stolen car in someone else's garage. Suppose the thief refused to give it back. Of course, the abuser is not going to walk home careless and defeated, carless and defeated. The car belongs to him, and he's going to do whatever it takes to get it back. Maybe he'll have to steal it back, and maybe he'll have to use force. In the mind of the abuser, abusive behavior toward a partner who expresses the notion of leaving or ending a commitment is a sort of repossession of something that economically belongs to him. The repercussions of advertisements that exhibit women as objects are profoundly damaging to the prospect of a healthy, egalitarian relationship between a man and a woman. The more the public is bombarded with images of women as objects, the greater the chances that men will internalize the idea of female objectification and dehumanization and resort to violent and aggressive behavior in an attempt to control and maintain something that does not really belong to him. Domestic abuse will only cease when we can put an end to the hypersexualization of women in the media and in our culture, and when we remind ourselves that men and women alike are whole, dignified human beings. Thank you.
Brave kids, I'll tell ya. Or I should say adults, I'm sorry. Okay, my name is Pat Norling. Most of you know who I am, but I just want to let you know anyway. So, Jennifer's mother, Jennifer was murdered, it'll be 8 years, I can't believe, on Valentine's Day. And so we decided to have this is the second annual essay contest. And I'm so proud of these girls. And I hope some guys join in sometime soon, which would be very, very nice. I would love to have some guys join in just to make it worth the while that men are involved and very good to their women, their girlfriends. For this contest, of course, we asked high school students to write a 1,000-word essay and some ideas for topics which included societal influences on the persistence of domestic violence, what can be done to decrease domestic violence, what would you say to a perpetrator of domestic violence, and describe what you think are healthy and unhealthy relationships. And someone asked me last year, and I was hoping that we'd get it this year, and I think we have someone that's going to do something very special. But it can be in any type of form, essay form, poet form. I'm trying to get those R's out right, but I'm tripping. So, and the fund for these awards for other initiatives supported by the Jennifer Lynch Committee have come from donations from our many supporters in the sales of Jennifer's artwork, poems, dragonfly pins, bracelets, and most recently I have done calendars with Jennifer's poems and her picture and photos. So the goal of the Jennifer Lynch Committee is to work with others in our community to bring awareness, prevention, and education to the issue of domestic violence. I'd now like to thank my boss, Alan Balson, Dr. Balson, for his continued support and for giving us this space here for the Garden of Remembrance, I'm sorry. Alan would like to have him come up and say a couple of words, and he's going to sing a beautiful song.
Well, thank you all for coming to this beautiful space, this Garden of Remembrance. Jennifer Lynch worked with us, as you may recall, and she was a bright light in all of our lives, and we miss her a lot. Jennifer she was a woman of many seasons, and one of her blessings was a love of music. And we used to chat about music all the time. And I'd like to play a tune that many of you probably know. It's a slightly heavy tune. It's by Bob Dylan. It's called Thank you. It's called A Hard Rain's Gonna Fall.
Been out in front of a dozen dead oceans. I've been 10,000 miles in the mouth of a graveyard, and it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rains are gonna fall. Oh, did you see my blue-eyed son? Oh, did you meet my darling young one? I met a newborn babe with wild wolves all around it. Saw a highway of diamonds with nobody on it. I saw a black branch with the blood that kept dripping. Saw a room full of men with their hammers a-bleeding. I met one man, he was wounded in love. And I met another man, he was wounded in hatred. I saw guns and sharp swords in the hands of young children. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rain are gonna fall. Darling young one, I'm going back out before the rain starts to falling, and I'll walk to the depths of the deepest sad forests, where the people are many and their hands are all empty, where the pellets of poison are flooding their waters, where the home in the valley meets the dark, dirty prison, and the executioner's face is always well hidden, where hunger is ugly and where souls are forgotten, where black is the color and where none is the number. And I'll know it and see it and think it and breathe it. I'll reflect from the mountains so all souls can see it. I'll stand on the ocean until I start sinking, but I'll know my song well before I start singing. And it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard, it's a hard rains are gonna fall.
To Jennifer also, because she and I used to love walking in the rain together, and when there was a storm out, she'd call me and say, okay Mom, go outside and listen, and I'd stand there with the phone and would listen. And then when she was with me here in Boston, we'd go out in the thunderstorming rain to walk, and I loved it. So this year down at the Cape, I was down the Cape with my grandkids this year, and it was just so beautiful because I get up at 5 o'clock in the morning and I do my walk, and I started walking and it was drizzling out, and I said, okay Jennifer, I think it's warm enough so you can give me a nice rainstorm. Well, I tell you, the skies opened up, I was sopping wet, which I loved it. And so we talked for a while, and I went back to the hotel room, and my poor granddaughter's looking at me going, what did you do? But I loved it. So I jumped in the shower with all my clothes on and washed the clothes and then took my shower. So now we have, before I introduce my second prize winner, who is Rose Rogers Dreyfus, and she is unable to be here because she is in London studying, which is beautiful. I'm so happy for her. But she did bring me some beautiful flowers in August, and she left this note with me. Dear Ms. Norling, I want to thank you so much for selecting me as one of the winners in the domestic violence essay contest. I also want to express my condolences for the loss of your daughter. No one should ever have to experience that type of loss, and I hope my essay helps spread awareness about domestic violence. Sincerely, Rose. So, thank you so much. And now I'd like to introduce Rose's mom, Cindy, is going to come up and read.
Greetings and her thanks to all of you, especially to you. Rose's essay is titled "Educating Teens is Key to Prevention." Domestic violence has been a serious issue for many years in the United States, with women as the main targets. Domestic violence is a problem for women of all ages and must be prevented. According to domestic violence statistics given by the U.S. National Library of Medicine and National Institutes of Health, it is the leading cause of injury to women. On average, in the United States alone, 3 women are murdered a day due to aggressive partners. 1 in 4 women experience forms of verbal and physical abuse from a partner in their lifetime, and approximately 1 in 5 women are raped during their life. These are horrifying statistics, and there should be a larger focus on ways these statistics can be lowered. The start of this could be with focusing education of teenagers. Teenage girls are at a higher risk than teenage boys of being harmed due to domestic violence. Girls could be in relationships where they are treated in ways that could lead to harmful abuse and not be aware of these risks. Many teenagers are not aware that even small negative comments from a significant other can be early signs of abuse, which could then lead to violence. Boys can be extremely controlling, which is why, according to broadcast journalist Linda Lowen, 1 in 5 teenage girls who were in a relationship with a boy said that he threatened them with violence if they were to break up. Studies done by the National Council on Crime and Delinquency showed that teen dating violence affects 9 to 35% of adolescents, and the Centers for Disease Control reports that 25% of adolescents say that they experience verbal, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse from a dating partner each year. There needs to be ways that allow girls to not feel powerless in their relationship, and this education should start in the school setting. It is also important to educate boys about healthy and respectful behavior toward girls. Teenagers spend an average of 35% of their time in school by the time they graduate high school. The majority of that time is focused on core subjects like English and math, and not much time is spent on real issues that affect teenagers' lives, such as domestic violence. Knowing what a prepositional phrase is or what a logarithmic equation is going to save you from getting raped? No. Schools should take initiative to make sure that teenagers are going to make positive decisions that are going to benefit their lives. Schools should have specific classes that educate teenagers on the dangers of domestic violence and strategies for dealing with potentially abusive situations. At Brookline High School, there are no classes or time periods dedicated solely to educating students about topics like domestic violence. A few adjustments to the school schedule could change this. For freshmen, health and fitness is a mandatory course. Half of the time is spent doing physical fitness, while the other half of the time is spent in a classroom learning about health-related topics such as CPR. Although the Brookline High School course catalog states part of the health and fitness classroom time is dedicated to relationships, violence education, and prevention, not enough information was provided to make it seem as though it was a prominent issue. Time should be spent educating kids about what a healthy relationship is, what verbal abuse is, the early signs of aggression, and teaching appropriate bystander interventions. The early times of high school are a crucial time for teens to learn about domestic violence because this is the stage in their lives when they are first being introduced to serious relationships. Most of the time, these teens are oblivious to warning signs that a significant other is putting them at harm. Another time during the Brookline High School schedule that could be used to educate students about domestic violence is during T-Block. At this time, there could be guest speakers who come to the school and share their experience or knowledge about domestic violence. This could be extremely effective because students pay more attention when they hear first-hand experiences instead of facts out of a textbook, because these are issues that are put into context for them. It also makes the subject matter personal, making it easier to connect with. In the future, there could also be classes offered to students to learn more about the hardships people are facing every day. The class could be designed to talk about current events and pressing issues in many countries. Domestic violence is just one of the many problems in this world. There should be more ways to educate people on the horrifying acts that happen every day, and this can start with educating kids in communities like Brookline. This can be one small step toward preventing domestic violence. Thank you.
Jennifer met her husband as a teenager, and that's why I want to just put across to all the teenagers when I go to the schools and speak to the kids. It's very important that when you are in a relationship that it's well received on both parts, because it's very important. Like Jennifer met her husband in a laundromat, and a lot of kids, unfortunately or fortunately, I don't know, it all depends, but they fall in love like right away. And it's really hard. It's really hard because they think that everything is so important in the relationship. And if it's a good relationship, then God bless them, you know, but sometimes it's not. And so I try to learn from my experience, because there were so many things that I didn't know that I found out after everything happened. And that's the worst part. I mean, they were married for 10 years. I had no idea. He, you know, I was his mother. I was better than his mother. He respected me. He loved me. I would do anything for you. I love you. But I never really heard him say to my daughter, I love you, or you're great, or anything like that. And it kind of bothered me, but like I say, it's a hard lesson, and that's why I like to talk to people. I could never speak before. I mean, I guess I get better with age, I don't know. But Jennifer kind of pushed me into this. It was one of those things, you know, I couldn't even raise my hand in school when I was a kid because I was always afraid I was wrong. And Jennifer used to say to me, Mom, speak up. Speak up. So now that's what I do. I speak up for her, and I speak up for whoever will listen, and hopefully, you know, I can help anybody. Anybody can call me anytime. But and just know that I'm always here for you. And these kids, I just love all you kids. You don't even know me half the time, but that's okay. I know you. Okay, so now I would like to introduce Chief Dan O'Leary from the Brookline Police Department. I was almost pinned.
Well, thank you for asking me to be here again this year. It's a great opportunity to come and say a few words, and I think it was an understatement earlier when Patty said that this event, that the reading from the students have only been the past 2 years. You've actually had this going for a lot more years than that, and I have to say that this year I think is the best turnout that you've had since you started having us all together here in this garden, and I think it's a real honor to you and a credit to your community for what you're doing here. So thank you. I think one of the great parts about coming here is listening to what the young people have to say, because the young people are really our future, and they really know a lot, and they seem not to have trouble speaking up, which is a real good thing. You hear the talk today about sexualizing women, or taking education and educating people, and that's really the way we are going to tackle this problem. I think we've come a long way since everyone started focusing on domestic violence, but we're not anywhere near where we should be. And by listening to the younger people tell us what we should all be doing is really a great step in the right direction. It really bodes well for the future. And if you look around the crowd here today, you can really see how far Brookline has come. You have the police department here with our investigators. You have District Attorney Morrissey here talking about domestic violence from the level of the county. You see school teachers, school guidance counselors, court personnel, everybody here working together for one goal, to try to eliminate domestic violence. It's a worthy cause to try to do. It's very difficult, but we can never give up. We have to keep educating people on it. You know, each time we think we turn a corner, and each time we think we get a little bit ahead of the game, a curve gets thrown our way. And over the last couple of months, we've seen different types of technology that can really be used as a double-edged sword. I want to tell you two stories that happened in Brookline in recent months. About a month ago, we started having a couple of crimes in one of our libraries, and it was a man, a sexual offender, a level 3 sexual offender, which is actually the worst kind, came in and started exposing himself to young girls. And what helped us solve that case, other than the cameras that were on there, and other than the victims that were very observant, is the GPS technology that offender had on his ankle. And we were able to trace his actions and put him in that library during each one of the crimes that were committed up there. The bad side of that is that there's an app that we're seeing a lot of young women using now. And in Brookline over the past 5 months, we've investigated 2 cases of sexual assault where young women late at night have gone on their iPhone, called up this app that's GPS based, and be able to meet a guy online. They met in some place that was a little bit obscure, and then they ended up on both occasions going back to their homes. Both occasions, by the end of that meeting, those women were sexually assaulted. We were called and we were conducting investigations. So we really, when the last speaker who did that essay talked about education, that's really what we have to do. We have to educate people that domestic violence or sexual assault is not acceptable, and we're the ones that can change it. And events like this, people like Patty, who I've never known not to speak up, what is really going to keep us all going and keep us focused and going in the right direction and tell us where we should be. And to the students at Brookline High School, I really I applaud you. It's really great that you've done that. It's great that you speak up. Never don't speak up, and keep everything going. So thank you very much. I look forward to next year, and hopefully we'll have some good news to report next year.
I've known the chief for quite a while now. I don't want to say we go way back because you're much younger than I am, but that's okay. I know the family. Now I'd like to introduce District Attorney Michael Morrissey.
The chief and I did ask if you could put us ahead of the kids next year because we don't like to be showing up. So if you could do that, and there's a couple other reminders. I'd also say that a number of my friends from the board of selectmen are here, and they do a lot of work, as you know, in town, and they're great community partners for me as well in the district attorney's office. But I'd like to thank you again for inviting me to be part of the vigil this year. And being here, seeing so many who are dedicated to work is really a reminder of how far we've come, but we still have a lot of work to do. And in fiscal year 2012, there were 67 restraining orders issued in Brookline District Court. That's kind of some good news. It means that 67 women and men understood that they could turn to the courts and that we would be there to help them. but there's a good number of people who probably didn't seek help from the courts. But it also means that 67 of our neighbors felt that they needed that kind of protection and did come forward. So we consider that a great start. You know, and having been a district attorney for a short time, on an evening very much like this last May, I spent the night standing out in front of a home in Stoughton as the detectives from my district attorney's office, the state police, and Stoughton police gathered evidence inside the house from a woman who had been killed. And among the items found was a children's book with a note in it, written by the ex-husband who would later be indicted for murder. And the note was really about the victim's relationship with another man. And ironically, they had been divorced for 2 years. At the time of the divorce petition said the woman had cited cruel and abusive treatment. She cited desertion. He had left her, he had a girlfriend, he had moved on, but she was not allowed to do so. It was all about control. Even after he left, even after the divorce, so much of what we see in domestic violence is about control, and we see it everywhere around us. Not all of it is fatal and not all of it is physical, but nevertheless, it's domestic violence. It's pervasive belief that one owns another, has a right to control what they do, whom they see, what they spend. We never, and even as a society, will be able to arrest our way out of the end of domestic violence. We need a sea of change, and I see that young people may be part of that tidal wave, hopefully, in what society believes, what individual believes. We need to dispel and destroy the ideas that allow abusive behavior to take root. As important as law enforcement's role is making and keeping victims safe, it's organizations and people like Pat, events like this that will gradually help erode that wall of ignorance. And the work of the young people here goes a very long way to some of your own peers. They'll listen to you, and I applaud you for the program. I think it's terrific. Last November, my office held a training for members of the clergy on how to recognize signs of domestic violence and child abuse in their congregations. Pastor Dan Lee from the High Rock Covenant Church was there. Reverend Allison Moore from the First Presbyterian Church was there. But in an anonymous comment that was submitted after the training, one clergy member wrote, "I wish this information had come to me while I was in the seminary." And because this is a problem that is all around us once we start to look. And this is a role for everyone to play. I'm not here to only stand with you, but to thank you, and people like Pat, to acknowledge that none of us, regardless of our power or position, can do this alone. But if we work together, we can all make a difference. Again, I look forward to working with all of you as we make a difference.
That's the good part about it, because we do all work together. And Brookline is a great community to start in and to work with everybody. You know, I'm third generation Brookline. I was born here. I don't live here anymore. Can't afford it, but I love Brookline, and I always have. And working here with Alan and all my other cohorts, and it's just a wonderful place to be because everybody works together, and that's what helps me. Because when I was looking, I had no place to go when my Jennifer was murdered, and I didn't know what to do. And someone had told me, she's here tonight, but to call the DA's office. I had no idea where to go, who to talk to, what I was going to do. And because I felt like I didn't even have a life anymore because my child was gone. And it's hard. It's very hard. The worst thing in the world to do is to lose a child to anything, never mind domestic violence. So I just, want to make sure I cover all my bases. Now I'd like to introduce Susan Howards. Susan, oh, there you are. Susan is one of the co-chairs of the Jennifer Lynch Committee.
Thank you so much. Thank you, Pat, for letting me speak. I'll just speak for a few moments. I'm sure you all heard the story of Puppy Doe, the dog who was found in Quincy, brutally attacked and tortured. And I asked to speak after District Attorney Morrissey because he was right on this and right out in front about the pet abuse. I'm not here to talk about Puppy Doe, but I am here to talk about facts about animal abuse and domestic violence. And I just want to share a very few facts with you that stunned me from the American Humane Association. 71% of pet-owning women entering shelters reported that their batterer had injured, maimed, or killed or threatened a pet. 32% reported their children had hurt or killed animals. 68% of battered women reported violence towards their animals. 87% of these occurred in the presence of kids. 13% of intentional animal abuse cases involve domestic violence. Between 25 and 40% of battered women are unable to escape abusive situations because they don't know what is going to happen to their pets. In one study, 70% of animal abusers also had records for other crimes. More American households have pets than have children. A child growing up in the United States is more likely to have a pet than a live-at-home father. And I don't want to go into more detail, but I wanted you to be aware that if there's domestic violence, there's probably pet abuse, or the reverse. If there's pet abuse, with social workers, teachers, ministers, law enforcement need to look at the relationship between domestic violence and pet abuse. I also want to say that our police department has a very active animal control unit, and the number to call, I believe, Chief, is 730-2222. If you see any pet being abused at a dog park or at a daycare center or at a grooming place, please call the Brookline Police Department. All of these statistics fly in the face of Jennifer's case. Because in Jennifer's case, there was a dog who was allowed to live. The murderer left a note: "I've killed myself, I've killed my wife, but my dog's in the backyard." We don't understand that. Thank you all.
Yeah, Jennifer couldn't have children, and her dog was her life. And she took care of that dog like she would take care of any child. And when he left that note saying that he killed her and he killed himself, and his dog was in the backyard, which was her dog. And we were very surprised after knowing that the pet abuse is really, really serious in these cases also. And now I'd like to introduce Sarah Caldwell Smith to read hers.
Thank you, Pat, for having us all here today. The evolution of secret abuse. Everything we do in our lives stems from the desire to have control. Whether it is control over our own futures, control of what we eat, what we wear, or control over the decisions we make in general. We feel safer when we are in control. But what happens when someone denies your control of your own life? When you are manipulated into making decisions that you otherwise would not make? When you are isolated from loved ones and live in fear of what this person might inflict upon you next? Emotional abuse, a form of domestic violence that is publicly unaddressed, is equally as prevalent as physical abuse and causes equally as much short-term and long-term damage to the victim. Identifying emotional abuse is like trapping gnats with your eyes closed. It is everywhere, yet it is extremely difficult to catch. Emotional abusers do not leave cuts and bruises on their victims. They leave no physical scrape or gash or scar that the victim can show to others if she gathers the courage to do so. The victim passes her days unarmed with any evidence to prove to someone the abuse she endures. She questions whether or not her situation can even be considered abuse, as words are the only weapons that have struck her. Why is it that this type of abuser, this elusive person, never lays a wrathful hand on the victim, yet the abused cries in her room, alone, pulling her hair, longing for a sympathizer, shaking with fear and confusion, as if she has been thrown to the ground, and wonders what she did wrong to deserve this? Emotional abuse kills one in a different way. It kills from the inside out. Although one's body will not begin to deteriorate as a result of this abuse, it can have life-altering and fatal effects nevertheless. When an abuser threatens a victim into doing certain things, or saying certain things, the victim feels as if he or she does not have control over his or her own life. Further, these abusers often attempt to isolate their victims from friends and family, both physically and emotionally, and make their victims feel guilty for disobeying them or even for being happy. An emotionally abused victim who is experiencing feelings of isolation and lack of control over his or her own life is at high risk of developing depression, an eating disorder, and even committing suicide. Though these severe consequences, emotionally abused individuals can become just as endangered physically as those who are abused by weapons and by fists. Emotionally abusive relationships can exist between spouses, individuals who are dating, and between a parent and child. In such intimate relationships, the line dividing simply unfair and irritating behavior from emotionally abusive behavior is both blurry and delicate. In cases of emotional abuse from a parent to child, for example, it is especially difficult to discern reasonable parental discipline from abusive behavior. Parenting methods differ greatly from household to household, so what some parents may consider to be using their authority for appropriate persuasion to encourage their kids to do things, other parents may consider to be unacceptable mental abuse. In parental and marital relationships, it is often challenging to determine what is okay and what is not. Further, in both romantic and parent-child relationships, individuals are often reluctant to report or acknowledge abuse because they love and are devoted to the perpetrator. In a twisted way, emotional abuse as physical abuse evolved. Similar to the way humans have outsmarted savage beasts in the past by using our brains, and similar to the way a growing majority of occupations today are intellectual rather than physical, emotional abusers commit their crimes in the modern method, without a tangible trace. This adaptation not only allows perpetrators to achieve the same results that they would if they abused physically, but also allows them to evade prosecution. Essentially, from the abuser's perspective, he or she gets all the desired personal benefits without any consequences by law. With the evolution of domestic violence, our methods of preventing and addressing this issue must also evolve. We can no longer ignore the persisting issue of emotional domestic violence. It is the inalienable right of every individual to feel safe and unrepressed in one's own home. The first step is for the victim to attempt not to be dependent upon the abuser for any aspect of his or her emotional, physical, or economic life. From the outside, friends of the victim can provide support for the individual and try to help develop constructive plans for solving the problem. As a community, we can also spread knowledge about the definition and consequences of both emotional and physical abuse. For Jennifer Lynch, and for all who have suffered from any form of domestic violence, we must continue to spread awareness, address the causes, and provide resources for those suffering from these tragic and devastating crimes.
Boy, 3 great essays, I have to say. Beautiful, beautiful. And now I'd like to invite Chairwoman, Board of Selectmen Betsy DeWitt to come and say a few words.
Well, I have to say, I'm here to welcome everybody on behalf of the Board of Selectmen, to thank Pat and her committee for organizing the essay contest, and especially to thank the writers of those essays who were inspiring and amazing. And we are doubly blessed to have folks like that who are part of the town-wide effort to oppose domestic violence. This vigil is in memory of all victims. And I have a sort of sad story that we all know, actually. There have been recent headlines in the news about Jennifer Martell, allegedly stabbed to death by her boyfriend, Jared Remy, who had been arrested for attacking her the day before. On the same day, a restraining order had expired, and then he was released without bail. Her family members have said that she was trying to get out of an abusive relationship with her controlling boyfriend. You just heard many comments from the district attorney's office, from Chief O'Leary, and from the essay writers describing this scenario. We've heard it all before. The story is tragic and typical of what we know about domestic violence, that victims know or are related to their assailant, that victims may be afraid or unable to leave their situation, that victims may not recognize that they're in serious danger even after they've had multiple injuries inflicted on them, and that they are often unwilling to tell close friends and family about this abusive relationship. One of our greatest challenges is to help potential victims recognize the signs of an abuser, such as uncontrolled anger or threatening behavior, before it is too late, and to understand that they can get help. One thing I hope everyone here tonight will take away with you is the thought that if you suspect, if you see someone who you worry about, who you think may be in an abusive relationship, if now we know there is a relationship between pet abuse and people abuse, watch for those signs. We try to educate our children and to protect them. We teach them that they can ask for help and that they can say no. But not everyone understands that. And so my hope is that everyone here will leave tonight with the intention of keeping your eyes open, being aware of potential domestic violence, and being prepared to say to anyone that you feel might be at risk that they can get help and they should be able to say no. In Brookline, in particular, we have the Jennifer Lynch Committee, and thanks to Pat Norling, we have a very active and supportive group. We have a victims advocate in the police department and in the municipal court, and we have community mental health services. But none of those institutions and entities can do their job well if we cannot identify the victim. So my parting note is thank you for all for coming, and go away with the notion that we will never ever have another Jennifer Lynch or Jennifer Martell if we all become empowered to identify and educate potential victims. Thank you.
On that note, some of you already know, but my Jennifer, her best friend knew that Jennifer's husband was abusive. And one time, for 2 hours, her husband held a gun to her head, driving home from the ocean, and didn't tell anybody. And what I want people to do, especially the younger kids, is if you know someone that is in trouble or going through anything like that, speak up. You can do it anonymously, you can do it any way you can to help. I don't know if it would have helped Jennifer in the end, but it's still the idea that her best friend knew. And she told me afterwards that Jennifer said, please don't tell anybody. So these are the power and control that these people have. And she was driving a car, and he held that gun to her head for 2 hours. Can you imagine the pain she must have been in? I can't. I would rather you lose a friend for an hour a day, a week, even a year, than to lose a friend for life for not saying anything. Now I'd like to invite Matt Cooney to say a couple of words. He's the new person with the teen center, our new teen center. I love it.
I'm the new person on the block, so to speak, and I want to say thank you, Pat, for having me here and for including me in this. This is an impressive gathering of people, and I want to thank you for your leadership and your advocacy for those who can no longer be with us, such as your daughter, and for those in our community that may be suffering currently from domestic violence. So your advocacy and leadership is both appreciated and, more importantly, is needed within our community. So thank you very much. I appreciate it. I think that I think the teens who spoke and the essays that were written were incredibly well articulated. I'd love to be able to expound upon the words that they expressed a few minutes ago, but fortunately, I don't need to. They were so well articulated, and they spoke both about the commercialism and the imagery that permeates our culture, to the need for education regarding domestic violence within our community, to the need, just about how much it affects the relationships and how much emotional abuse, the toll that emotional abuse takes on people in our lives. And we don't need to look any further than the statistics, which demonstrate the prevalence of abuse in teen relationships, to look that between the ages of 16 and 24 or 25 years of age, women are at the most risk to experience violence in intimate relationships, to know that this is an issue that we must deal with, and we must deal with directly, and we must be aggressive in our need to get the information out to people, as well as to educate people on how to seek help. I look forward to working with you, Pat, in the future. The Teen Center is just getting going. I think this points to the need about why we need a facility such as ours, and that I look forward to being a partner with Pat, with the town, with Alan, with the police department, with our selectman's office, with our school system, to try to bring about the best education and the best advocacy that we can within our community. The final thing I want to say is something that you're doing, Pat, is near and dear to my heart, which is, I gave a talk on this last year, which is addressing issues at the community level. And I think that if we all really address these most pertinent issues within our community that are within our grasp, that are right here, and if every community did this, the impact that we could have worldwide would be tremendous. So again, I thank you for your efforts, and thank you for having me.
Okay, and now I'd like to invite Gloria Rudish, Dr. Rudish, to come up and read one of Jennifer's beautiful poems.
Sorry about a bad knee. Anyway, it's a great honor to be asked to read some words from Jennifer, so that in some way Jennifer can speak to you too. And I knew Jennifer when she worked at the health department. A lovely, lovely person. The poem I'm going to read is Pat's favorite, and one of my favorite among Jennifer's wonderful a set of wonderful poems. It's called A Poet's Dream by Jen Lynch. The dream I have is to write a book, so prying eyes may take a look into my life, so they might find many parts of me, even the worst kind. The romantic fool, we'll see, doesn't take that sort to write poetry. Wordy lines or the quietest phrase, depends on mood, or the latest phrase. And some painful lessons, one's hard to learn, like when building bridges, the soul may burn. Within the pages are my hopes and fears, my belief in love and things held dear, a crazy imagination so wild and free, faith, hope, love, even charity, and some fantasies of promised love or more, the kind you think you've waited a lifetime for. And the negatives in life, but the positives too, the moon, the stars, soft rain, skies of blue. I hope the reader finds emotion to feel, although all that I write is not necessarily real. It all comes from the mind of a poet's dream, a heart wide open to thoughts and scheme. And among these thoughts that I write down is the beauty of truth and the humor of a clown. I try to touch on all sides of life, the good, the bad, the happy, the strife. Perhaps you'll see a little bit about you. Crack a smile, have a laugh, shed a tear or two. But when you're finished reading what comes out of myself, please find me a careful spot to collect dust upon your shelf.
Yeah, she had a lot of talent. And Jennifer, she wrote poetry. She did photography. Never took a lesson, but it was just perfect. And now I'd like to invite Hope Troy and some peer leaders to come up. Hope is up at the high school, and she works with the peer leaders, trains the peer leaders, and works with the substance abuse and the town of Brookline.
It's really hard to follow Jennifer's words, but in thinking about it, Pat has brought to Brookline High School, which is so obvious by the Steps to Success students who are here, who have made a real commitment to make people aware about teen dating violence, and the peer leaders. Pat comes to school at 7:30 in the morning and works with our kids. She gives her time. And what we want her to know is that even though she might think that kids are not listening, they are. So we are going to read, or Gigi and Natasha are going to read a poem that was written by a student named Matthew Brown, a boy, who's very quiet. And Pat probably doesn't even know that he was in the class because he's so quiet. So, ladies, you're on.
My Relationship by Matthew Brown.
The first 2 weeks were a dream come true.
The guy I had been waiting for, who my friends and my parents agreed,
Was so kind and so thoughtful.
but after those 2 weeks came what felt like a long dark alleyway,
A fist-sized hole in my kitchen drywall.
a black eye hidden by sunglasses.
A bloody lip from slipping when I got out the shower.
This is my relationship, which I tell my friends is fine.
A silenced text after the 20th message asking, "Where are you?"
The sweater that never got worn because he didn't like it.
The speeding car I was in when we had our argument.
A blocked doorway.
The friends I told to keep quiet because it wasn't his fault.
Until it got so bad I had to get out.
This was my relationship.
Thank you, ladies. That was beautiful. And thank Matt. When I see him, I'll give him a big hug. It's very important that men, boys, men, know what a relationship is. And they can love just as much as anybody else. And it's really important that they know how to love. And that's why I wanted, especially, to have, hopefully, next year for the essay contest, we do have a boy that will enter. I would love it. So, I'd like to thank, of course, the Jennifer Lynch Committee members, Chief O'Leary, D.A. Morrissey, Betsy DeWitt, and all the members of the Selectmen Board, Alan Balsam, Lloyd Gelano, Matt Cooney, Dr. Rudish, Don Sibber, and Ellie from Cuckoos, all who have been such an entity in my life. You've all been so wonderful and all been behind me. And of course, our three winners, I would like to give you all your awards now and your prizes. Okay, the third prize for Natalie James is the, okay, it's okay, come on up. It's the Jennifer Lynch Committee Against Domestic Violence Award in memory of Jerry Trombley, who worked here at the health department, and he was worked with the substance abuse. And Jerry had passed away, but he helped me get this started. And I want to give this award in memory of him. The second is the Jennifer Lynch Committee Against Domestic Violence. And the second prize, we are very happy that we could do the Lauren Dunn Ashley Memorial Award. Is presented to Rose Rogers Dreyfus. And Cindy, if you'd like to come up and receive this for your daughter. And our first prize winner is the Jennifer A. Lynch Memorial Award. And this is presented to Sarah Cardwell Smith. Amazing women. I am so happy that you're all here. I miss Rose, but we'll catch her when she comes home. I can imagine. Okay, so now I'd like to thank everybody for coming. Brookline is a great community. I have some friends here from a group that I belong to also. It's parents who've lost children, and they're also my mentors. I love you guys. So I'd like to conclude the event and invite everyone into the Denny room for refreshments. And thank you all again. I appreciate it.